Good afternoon, everybody. Whenever you have to set up extra seats for an event, that's a great sign. So there's still a little scrambling in the back, and I'm sure other people will come in as well. Especially at this time of year, which is extremely busy on this campus. It's good to see so many of you here. I'm Gary Bouchard. I'm a longtime member of the English department and the founding director of the Gregory Grappone Humanities Institute, which you may hear a little bit more about before this conversation is over, as Amanda is joining us. But I want to say this event was one that was sprung upon us by Amanda, and one that we weren't planning for that turns out to be very, very providential. And it's providential because we've spent the year in the Institute with a series on labor and leisure. And we've had some great talks, not the least of which was Amanda's last week about the history of that business and their pivot to a different kind of workplace. Really inspiring talk. We'll hear more about that. So when she reached out and we settled on April 24th, some of you may know I spent April 23rd reading a lot of sonnets. So I reached out to my colleague, Max Latona, and said, can we do this? And we pulled together and we did it. Max is not here because he's taken ill. He sends his regrets, but I'm very grateful to Hannah and the Center for Society and Ethics. They get the banner and I get the microphone to introduce. But a really good partnership, and our thanks to the Institute of Politics for hosting us in this wonderful space with parking. We thought that would be a good idea to have parking available this time of year. So we'll be hearing more about this book. I'm just going to make one small commercial, and that is the Humanities, the Journal of the Grappone Humanities Institute, just released yesterday, filled with student writing, art, and research, and it's beautiful. And so I'm recommending, however you can, to get a copy of that. So the two people that we have on stage tonight, you'll learn more about them as we go. There's so much that we can say about either one of them. James Rhee can maybe explain more how he goes from teaching high school to Harvard Law to venture capitalism. But I just spent an hour with him, and he's an educator. He's a teacher, certainly, and he teaches at several places formally. And Amanda, if you don't know Amanda Grappone, you're not from New Hampshire. So welcome to the Granite State, right? Fourth generation steward of that wonderful automobile business with its history, and also the owner of Grappone Mazda, and so many other things that she does in this state. What I can tell you, just from the time that we've spent, was able to give James and Amanda just a brief tour. We spent some time at the Grappone Institute and made our way out to the quad and over to the Abbey Church, where James had the great idea of putting his phone with a wonderful musical version of Amazing Grace on the architectural center in the middle. And these are two very soulful people that are going to be sharing the stage. I think that's the most important thing to know. And for reasons I still haven't quite understood, James requested that I select a poem to read to begin the proceedings tonight, to begin this conversation. This will be a conversation that will spill right out into here, into a wider conversation, and then there'll be a reception afterwards. So from this conversation to this one, we hope it continues out into the reception and into your evening and the rest of your lives. I thought a lot in reading through James' book and learning about him and his ideas, what poem to pick. And I settled on something very unusual. And it's unusual, but I thought we're going to be at the Institute of Politics. And I'll bet there's never been a poem read at the Institute of Politics by a US president, whose picture is somewhere up on this wall. Because not a lot of US presidents have published poetry, but one did, and it's a pretty good book published in 1995 by somebody who has succeeded at everything except hospice, and he continues to live. Jimmy Carter wrote poetry. And James comes to his thinking through an origin story from his childhood. And so I was looking through this book, and I found this is also an origin story Jimmy Carter reflecting upon his boyhood. How do we come to believe the things we believe? And how do we come to behave the way we do? I might read the poem twice if you don't get it because it's short, but it's called The Pasture Gate. Pasture Gate. So, this empty house 3 miles from town was where I lived. Here I was, back, and found most homes around were gone. The folks who stayed here now were black, like Johnny and AD, my friends. As boys, we worked in Daddy's fields, hunted rabbits, squirrels, and quail, caught and cooked catfish and eels, searched the land for arrowheads, tried to fly the smallest kite, steered barrel hoops with strands of wire, and wrestled hard. At times we'd fight without a thought who might be boss, who was the smartest or who was the best. The leader for a few brief hours was who had won the latest contest. But then we were 14 or so. As we approached the pasture gate, they went to open it and then stood back. This made me hesitate. Sure, it must have been a joke, a tripwire maybe they had planned. I reckon they had to obey their parents' prompting or command. We only saw it vaguely then, but we were transformed at that place. A silent line was drawn between friend and friend, race and race. Thank you, President Carter, Amanda Grappone, James Rhee. It is our honor to have you begin this conversation with us.
Try to dispel words of wisdom for younger people especially. And I always tell people, if you find somebody interesting or compelling, if you hear them, if you read their books, if you hear them on the radio or a podcast or something, reach out to them. The worst they can do is not get back to you. So I did hear James on Brene Brown's podcast, if anybody knows Brene Brown's work. And I thought, wow, that sounds like somebody I probably need to learn more about. So I ended up watching his TED Talk, which led me to going to his website, which led me to emailing him. And I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect him to graciously get back to me probably within 48 hours or something. And I had sent him my TED Talk and I said, I think there's some commonality here. And what do you think? And he was kind enough to watch it and to give me some feedback. And so that sort of started a dialogue between us and eventually grew into a friendship. And I think what we've discovered about each other in the short period of time we've known each other is that we both just truly love humanity. We love people. And we are fortunate and blessed to be in positions to be able to do something about it and to talk to groups of people like you and even write books and reach a wider audience. And I think what I'd love to do is start with a quote from your book, if I may, because it really resonated with me. Very similar to something I said in my TED Talk. And it's this: the boundaries that separate who we are at home and who we are at work are as artificial and learned as the constraints some of you may feel are pinning you down. So if you wouldn't mind, can you expound a little bit upon the difference between a person at work and a person at home?
For me, there isn't one. I've been subject to personality tests in my life, just in various careers, managing money. They test your personality and I take them. And I used to get feedback. People would say, whether you like me or not, we haven't seen someone who scores exactly the same internal and external persona. And I said, is that good? Do you like me internal? Because then, and it took me a long time to realize that that is how I am. I'm sort of the same person in every context. I think being a different person, being that one person is complicated enough. I'm still working on this person. And so why try to have two different persona or even three? That's my very simplistic rationale. So I have sort of gone through life as like Harold and the Purple Crayon. My life is like this. I told Brene that my life was a hot mess, that my career is this, but I've never had a career. I've really just tried to lead a decent life and keep learning, and it's taken me to different careers. And so I think at my core, I am a teacher. And I think as most great educators know, and I'm learning constantly about what it means to be a great teacher, is that oftentimes you're one of the best learners. And so I like to learn from anyone. So that's my mindset. And I think that where I was in my life 10 years ago, which is when the book sort of tracks a bit, I felt that I was losing that and that I was living a life of simulation. I felt like I was in a video game, and I wasn't particularly pleased with the behavioral primes that I was dealing with in my work life, and I was struggling. And then my father was dying at the same time, and it all sort of came to a head, and I made some decisions.
So I think it would be helpful for those of us who haven't been able to read the book to give just, if you could, sketch out for us, what is a red helicopter? Why is the book called that? And why did the red helicopter reappear in your life so many years later after its original appearance?
I mean, the cover of the book, there's a reason why there's not a red helicopter. It is a metaphor, and everyone is encouraged to just have their own red helicopter. But for me, it was a literal red helicopter. I was 5 and I came back from kindergarten. My parents were immigrants. My dad was a pediatrician. My mother was a nurse. So I come from a long line of caregivers. It's just genetically this way. And I had a toy. Life was not easy in the Rhee household in 1976. It just wasn't. They were 10 years here in the country. My dad was a small business owner, which is one of the other things we really sort of talk about. He was a pillar of our community. He took care of a lot of families. And it was families that are currently like hating each other. My dad took care of everybody. And I came home and had a toy, and it was conspicuous because we didn't have a lot of toys. There was not a lot of frivolity in our household. It was really like scarcity. It was like survival. And so I came home and I'm doing this with $2. Remember the 5 and dime? Remember you ripped open the package and it took 10 minutes to rip it open, like you couldn't, and your fingers are bleeding and all of these things. You don't want to cut it because you're going to hurt the toy. That's what it was. And my parents said, you can't take that from school. You're not allowed to do that. And so this is a story of a lot of things being wrong or thinking they're wrong, but it's actually right. So I was accused basically of taking it from school. And you have to picture me bowl cut.
I'd like
You know
to,
the
I
bowl
would like to
cut?
see a
You
picture of it.
must have had a bowl cut. Did you have a
I
bowl
mean,
cut
I
at
did
5?
try to
Everyone
cut
had a
my
bowl
own hair
cut.
once and it didn't turn out very well.
I had a
but-
bowl cut until 13, and then the side part. But my face was very flushed, and I was like, I didn't do that. And I said, oh, this family came in to give me a toy, and it was Christmas time. And then my parents then said, oh, we're so sorry, like, we're bad parents. You're never gonna make it in this country. We didn't know that in America, everyone gives toys in public school Long Island, that's what you're supposed to do. And we're so sorry, like you must have felt very left out. And then I said, I'm the only one who got one. And then they asked, why did this family come give it to you? And I got very nervous. My dad was very Socratic. I went to law school. I was very well prepared for law school. But it was not a comfortable, I don't know if you remember when you're 5 and you're sort of breathing heavily and you're sort of nervous and you don't know if you're right. So I said, I don't really know why I got it. And then they found out later, and they called me back into the family room, and I don't remember how much time passed. And they said, we found out why you got this toy, but instead of praising me, they said, why are you giving half of the lunch your mom makes every morning at 5 in the morning to your friend? Why are you doing that? And I thought I was in trouble again. I'm like, oh, I'm grateful to my mother, and my mother showed love through food. It was just, that's how it was. And we didn't have a lot of money. And so I thought, oh, but I remember speaking with such confidence, like at the risk of being like being insolent. I said, why wouldn't I give? I had enough. He never has lunch. And I thought I was going to be in big trouble. And it's one of the few times that my dad, I think a lot of men, I think we unfortunately have a hard time sort of expressing emotion sometimes. And my dad, and this is 1970s parenting with Korean culture. And it was one of the few times I saw him emotional. And he just said, he looked at me, he said, you think I'm mad at you? It was just that. And I was like, oh, and what I write is that I felt this warm ache in my chest. And I asked the reader, I said, do you know that feeling? It's that feeling. And I said, I did something good. And I didn't ask for anything. I didn't know. It was just intuitively wise. It was correct. And so that symbol, over the course of many years, became a source of embarrassment and trying to make it in. My parents also wanted me to be successful in another way, right? To not just assimilate, but to do well. And so for an immigrant family, what did that mean? Like, we would try to go to Harvard. I went to Harvard like twice, actually, right? And then
Not because you failed the first time.
Yeah, well,
Be real clear.
all these things,
Sure.
and you're trying to reconcile. You're trying to reconcile two things of what success is, and it was not easy. It's not easy for any of us, right? And I'm trying to reconcile two cultures, all of these things, and later on we'll talk about it. I finally reconciled it more in musical terms. It was really music that allowed me to sort of mentally come to a model to reconcile these things. And that's the story. And so that red helicopter story was a source of some sadness, actually, as I think back. Not my parents, not some scarcity, and there was all of these things. And then over time, I had to make some decisions during my private equity life that I never stopped being that boy. I just didn't. And then it really reminded me of it, and we'll get into this, is that when I made the radical decision to basically rip up my life, I ripped up my life at 42. I just went away. I actually went away. I was selling jewelry and hanging clothes in predominantly Black neighborhoods across the country. I left. So the whole resume that my parents wanted from me, I said, I just left. And the generosity with which I was greeted by a predominantly Black female employee base, it reminded me of that feeling. Like it was quite beautiful how I thought that they had every reason to reject me. And I showed up like this, and I really kind of showed up naked. I just said, I'm James. That's it. That's all I've got for you. Like I'm not Black, I'm not woman, I'm not fashionable. I've never run a retail company. I've never been an operator. This is all I am. This is what I'm here, though. I'm the only one who showed up, and I'm here. And the way they greeted me and that feeling of how they just accepted me for me. And it's very hard to find that again in your adult life. And I just remembered the story. I just said, maybe that 5-year-old James was quite wise. And that maybe all the education I've gotten made me less wise than I was when I was 5.
So to bridge a little bit of a gap for people who don't know, you're referring to your time at Ashley Stewart. So you were
Yes.
first-time CEO, 42 years old, you said, yeah?
Yeah, I was a high school teacher who went to law school to be a public defender, who then was in the tallest buildings in Boston, managing billions of dollars of money. Like at private equity, you name it. And when you picture what that is, I was there. And in 2013, there was this company called Ashley Stewart. And it was a 20-year failing company, one of the largest businesses employing and serving Black women in this country. But no one knows about it because that story doesn't get told a whole lot on Wall Street, right? But it was very important to these women. And it was a pretty big company, like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Like this is not an insignificant company. And I'm a humanities major. very proud to be a humanities major. I studied particularly 19th century world PP&E. That's sort of what I studied. And I said, this isn't a clothing company. This is important. It holds a lot of communities together. And so yeah, my dad was dying at the same time, the last few years of Parkinson's. And it just sort of hit me. I just, so I didn't like the way my Wall Street world was talking about the business. I thought it was offensive. And so you get to a point when they said, well, what are you going to do about it? And so I left. I resigned from the board. And then I showed up, and it was supposed to be 6 months. I was supposed to come home. And I know what I'm doing. Like, even though I've never run a company, I'm very experienced in distress, right? I know how this game works. And I wanted to protect the company and get it to a gentle bankruptcy so that it could reorganize and the stores would live so that the women would have this place to be. But during those 6 months, I was horrified. How these women were treated, how this company was treated, how I was treated now, because I was now the CEO of this company, right? I was with them now. And all the mechanisms that I was a part of, I was facing now. And so after 6 months, I tried to beg for money. I had some theories about where the world was going, which we can get into, but long short of it, I had a theory and I redesigned the whole model, which is sort of what I do in life. It's sort of like Harold. I take a crayon, I said, it's this. And I tried to get money from the world of which I'm a part, and the entire world said no. And I had a choice to make. And the book is about agency. Fundamentally, it's about agency. And my wife and I looked at each other and she said, what are you going to do? And I really wanted to look the other way. I wanted to come home. I just couldn't. So I called in some favors and I raised the money and I showed up at bankruptcy court and I took out just like intellectual property basically. And I told the women, they had said to me, ride or die. And I said, okay. And so that's what I did. And so it ended up being my entire 40s doing this.
So your 6 months became 7 years?
7 years. And I don't think the work is done at all. Like after I lost both parents during this time. And the ending of 7 years happened really when my mother passed away. I just couldn't do it anymore. And we can get into why I was doing. The women reminded me of my mother, right? Just the way they held themselves, the character they had against a lot of headwinds, the way they were, taking care of their kids. It's heroic. And a lot of times they were blaming themselves and saying, oh, it's our fault that we can't do more. And I would have this conversation with my mom growing up. My mom was the best leader I've ever met in my life, is my mother. But she was made to feel small a lot because it was hard for her to quote win in here, not speaking the language and things. And these women, I had a chance to basically do my childhood again, but as a much more empathetic father. And even though I was the CEO, in reality, it was really like a son wanting their mother to win so badly. And that's what we did. And so it was 7 years. And then after my mom passed away, it was like, she died in 3 weeks, diagnosis to, it was like, I just couldn't do it. And obviously when I look back, I was depressed. I mean, I had to have been, I just couldn't do it. And so the women knew, they said to me, we died today too, didn't we? And I said, yeah, I'm sorry. And so, but 7 years and my family is in Boston, this business was in Secaucus. So it took a real physical toll. Anyway, so that's, so the work's not done. And I tried to hide. I went into hibernation after, and then I knew the work wasn't completed when the president of Howard University, which is arguably the HBCU in this country, Dr. Frederick, called me and surprised me and said, would you please be the Johnson Chair of Entrepreneurship at Howard University? And so I proceeded to then sob in front of like 10, 15 Howard with the leadership of Howard, and they're all uncomfortable. He's like, this grown man sobbing, like it's, and it was very emotional. I just said, I didn't know if anyone really saw what we did. And he said, no, we all saw what you did. We saw how you did it. And it wasn't what you said, it was what the women, we could see it in their faces, what you were all doing. And so I've been serving as the Johnson Chair of Howard for the last 3 years, and it's part of a portfolio of work that I'm doing. So yeah, now you don't have to read the book. But amidst all of this, I mean, I think some of it's phrased as it's a parable for a reason. It's just written as a parable. And fundamentally, it's a story of a son and his mother and a son and his father. And then a group of unlikely friends reminding him of that relationship, of what Red Helicopter means. And then them helping him bury his 2 parents. And all while this is happening, me making a commentary on the state of our society and capitalism and mutualism and its disintegration, and showing that this group of misfit toys pulled off arguably one of the most unprecedented business transformations in the United States without money. We really used social capital. It was a fundamental perspective change on what work can be. And that's how we've gotten to be close, because it's just, that's how you were raised. That's what your family does. And I'm trying to remind the country about some old values. There's nothing creative in what I'm saying. It's some old truths from lots of different cultures. And then me asking the question of everybody, saying, do you remember? No.
And I think too, the other connection that we have come to find pretty powerful is, and I'm referencing this book, many of you I'm sure have heard of this. This is the Calendar of Wisdom. And this is the book that my brother and dad started reading and corresponding back and forth about 4 months before my brother passed away. He died in 2015, and the book was gifted to him. I'm looking at his twin sister to make sure I'm accurate here. Gifted to him by his wife.
I actually don't know.
We don't know. We'll get back to you on that.
I
Somehow the book.
Yeah.
Oh, from dad?
think
Okay, all right. So my brother ended up with his book, and every single day, the way it's organized, Leo Tolstoy spent probably about a decade of his life, 15 years, I think, actually, it was writing and rewriting this and editing this. And basically now how it's laid out is every single day, there's a common theme of some sort on each day. And there are many different wisdom traditions that are quoted. And Leo, we're on a first name basis now. He would throw in his own thoughts, and then if he wanted to summarize the day, he would put that in italics. So you know that those are his summarized thoughts on it. So my brother and dad started to correspond on a daily basis because my brother was obviously failing. He had had cancer for several years at that point. He was living out in Seattle. My dad was in Florida. And this was one way that they connected. So they would both read the passages, and then they would email back and forth with whatever thoughts they had for the day. And so when my brother passed away, my dad, I don't know if you know this part, Allison, but my dad asked me to sort of be the other person to correspond with, and I am not very organized. So I'm like, I'm sorry. I think that was a special thing for you guys. And as much as I want to carry this tradition on, so he was able to find something like 90 other friends to join him. And anybody in this room, he would love to have you in the group. Everybody, including James and I, every morning we get this. He sends us a picture of all of the quotes, and we read through them. Sometimes we respond, sometimes the responses are shared. But that was, for me, really fun when I first listened to the audio version of your book, and I put my earbuds in, and I was anxiously awaiting the day that this released, because I had it all planned out. I was going to go to the track and just do endless loops while listening to James Rhee tell me about his life story. And the first thing that you see in James's book is a quote from Leo Tolstoy. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
And my father passed away in 2015. My mother was also a nurse.
Yes, yep. Like my mom.
And
Yep.
so the book has a lot of serendipity in it. And I always believe that serendipity comes from being intentional.
Mm.
So the book is just a book of oxymorons. And that's the beauty of that reconciliation of oxymorons. I think that's where life is beautiful, and you create. And like the quote Yeah, can I read the
Please.
prologue? Literally, I wasn't going to have one. And then this quote, this is what Leo, Mr. Tolstoy to me, Leo to you.
Keep reading. It gets
yeah.
better.
The voice of your conscience can always be singled out above the noise of your other wishes, because it always wants something seemingly useless, seemingly senseless, seemingly incomprehensible, but at the same time, something actually beautiful and good, which can be achieved only through effort. And I think that's what the book is about, is trying to find truth, which physicists would say it's beauty, to find something beautiful. And how do you design it? And it did take a lot of work. And it was worth it.
I think the word soul, you've mentioned it a little bit, and we talked before we had a chance to, sorry, we had a chance to talk for about an hour, as Gary mentioned before coming over, and the concept of soul came up, and you referenced that sometimes people feel uncomfortable even using the word. Sometimes, and Gary mentioned it as well, somebody who was speaking here hesitated before uttering the word soul. And I think it comes through beautifully in your book that there is a just certain soul or spirit about people. And this is what you're doing so beautifully, is you're connecting with other people who just have that innate sense. And maybe it's because they've done the work to get through the weeds and the thorns of all of the nonsense and the fear that closes in our thinking. Or maybe they're just innocent enough, or maybe they're just that way. But a lot of people move through the world, like the women you had a chance to work with their souls sort of just out and about and
Yeah.
ready to take on the world. And talk to us a little bit about
Yeah.
when you hear the word soul, what does that make you think of? It's specific either to Ashley Stewart or
Yeah.
just in general.
Well, there's a Korean word that runs throughout the story too, called chang. And so that's soul. And part of the story is actually me understanding what it means to be Korean. I grew up very not Korean. I mean, it was like I love Springsteen. If we had a guitar here, I'd rock it out for you. Like it's and think about the Red Helicopter as a story about also my parents' heritage, right? Just understanding this. So in a lot of non-Western philosophies, there's a little bit less emphasis on like form. A lot of Asian philosophy is much more built on movement. There's much more sort of ambiguity. It's less Aristotelian in its pecking order of importance. It's much more based on like calligraphy, right? It's all movement based. And so in the Korean word, there's a Korean word called chang, which I didn't really understand what chang means. Red Helicopter, that toy, it's a symbol of chang. It's something that is a symbol, or sometimes it's not a symbol of a connectedness. I think we have chang. It just connects people and you can't see it, but you feel it. And sometimes feeling, in school is viewed as less disciplined. If you feel something, it's not rational. Even though a lot of the neuroscience, like feelings and emotions, it's neuroscience, it's brain science, but we think it's less important, feelings. A lot of economists we're not utility driven, but we still think economics is based on utility driven. It's not, right? So chang is that connectedness, that mutualism, that feeling that you need each other, that can't be explained. It can't be written down. You can't take a picture of it. It's not tangible, which is why my TED Talk is about goodwill, which is intangible, which is why we all cry at the end of It's a Wonderful Life when Mary makes George's life tangible to him, and then that goodwill actually gets monetized. I'm pretty sure they didn't ask for the money back. Right? And think about it, he was a small business owner. He had a savings and loan. He was commercially viable in his community, making money, enough money, and he didn't think he was good enough. And so that's what that soul. So when I was sitting there, you have to picture the first day of me showing up at Ashley Stewart, taking you back now to August 2013, kind of now a grown-up 5-year-old. Remember the story in the family room about me saying, like, I don't know. I did it again. So now I'm 42, standing in front of everyone, admitting that I'm all of these things, that I'm not any of these things. I had to hire a police officer down the road to protect the employees because they were being harassed in the parking lot because the company had just filed for bankruptcy 3 years before. It was chaos, literally chaos. And me saying, I didn't say soul that first town hall meeting, but after admitting that I was not everything that they needed and saying this, I said, but maybe if we can center and reconcile kindness and math, we have a shot. That's what I said. And my inside voice said, you're an idiot. Like, where did that come from? I'm very unscripted. I don't script things. I'm like, where did that come from? I haven't said kindness, I think, since I was confirmed. You don't say it often, right? You don't say kindness like a lot, and then I said, and math, and said, what? Anyway, and so from there, that was the great reconciliation and I posited that maybe goodwill is the product of kindness and math. That when you can operationalize kindness and math correctly, you create this intangible asset. So while I was doing this, I was understanding what Chung meant because I saw it in the stores. That feeling, why the women came to me and said, they would say to me, we like you. And a lot of these women have been burned over and over again by people promising big things and they don't do it. Right? People talk big, they don't do it. And I tend to talk little and then I'm like, I'm going to say it once and we're going to do it. Like it's just going to happen. And so many years later, I asked them, why did you trust me? They have this PE guy wearing pleated khakis, like blue blazer, like picture me, Boston private equity, and this face. And there was no Wi-Fi, so they didn't know what I looked like. We had no Wi-Fi in 2013. So they were like, he's Korean. They would call each other on pot lines. You know, remember the old pot lines? He's Korean. And there's a lot of tension between, on the surface, Korean and Black people, even though there's a lot of very wonderful stories that don't get told. But the headline is that everyone hates each other, which is not true. And so they would say, you know, James, we could feel your soul. That's what they said to me. We felt it. We knew. And we could feel your heart. And I said, that's awesome. Like, I'm still this kid. Why is that bad? Actually, it's made me a better investor too, which we can get into, but like, yeah, I do have a big heart. That's awesome. Thank you, actually. And no one said that to me in how many decades? It wasn't a compliment where I was working, right? They were like, you have too big a heart. And I said, oh, why is that bad? But here, it wasn't bad. They said, we like it. It's good. And then in the book, what I write is that if you could speak Korean, you would have said you have so much chung. That's what Koreans would say. Like, it's that soul. We can feel it. And a lot of this book is about feelings. And so we're connected now. And to be here is now you're sharing your extended community. And it's nice. And that's the way I think life should be. And that's what Red Helicopter ultimately is about. That is what goodwill is about.
I love that. That leads me to one of my favorite Tolstoy quotes, which I need old lady glasses for. Bear with me. This was from April 21st, so last Sunday. It says, it is a mistake to think that there are times when you can safely address a person without love. You can work with objects without love, cutting wood, baking bricks, making iron, but you cannot work with people without love. In the same way as you cannot work with bees without being cautious, you cannot work with people without being mindful of their humanity. It is the quality of people as it is of bees. If you are not very cautious with them, then you will harm both yourself and them. It cannot be otherwise because mutual love is the major law of our existence. And I feel like as much as I never had words for it through my career, I've been working in the car industry for about 25 years now. And that's a place where I think the show of love for humanity is in such stark contrast with what people expect to find in a setting like that in a dealership? I mean, raise your hand if you've had a bad car buying experience. It's not uncommon. James has never done business with me, so I know it's not at my place. It's good. But that, I just remember, especially being a woman too, probably makes a big difference. You know, I can get away with some things that my brother never could get away with when he was in the business. I'm a hugger, you know, so I was never, I don't think I was ever reported for being creepy. Because I love people, and it spills out of me in a way that sometimes is physically affectionate. And I think that women, like I said, can kind of get away with some of those things. And you had the benefit of working with, sounds like a lot of ladies who were not afraid to show how much they loved each other. They loved their customers, that the stories in the book about, is
Yeah.
it Cherry who visited someone in the hospital, or?
They always did. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, what they did, so you know, not to spoil the book, but it's one of the big moments in the book. It was what they did for my family. I mean, this is, even though it sounds like I was enlightened in August 2013, I wasn't. It was a process. The armor kept coming off, like one by one. If you look behind me, I was like, why am I carrying this? Like, I'm so tired, right? And then what happened is that there was a moment in 2015. My dad died same year as your brother. Same week, my daughter almost died in a camp accident, not for profit. Same process, by the way, not for profit. I say there are no lemonade stands and a lot of not for profits too. The lawyers got involved, circle the wagons, wouldn't help give us information to save our daughter's life because they were worried about liability. I knew the chairman of the board. He was a younger private equity guy that I interviewed. And I'm looking at him like this. And I asked him, what happened to you? What happened to you? So that's all happening. And it sounds like a movie, but it really happened. So I'm sitting there for 1 week, not sleeping, and I didn't tell anybody. So I lied to my assistant. I told her a little bit. I said, just tell everyone I went on vacation. And I hadn't taken a vacation in 2 years because the company, I was still worried it would, what we did was kind of radical, right? I'm like, is it working? I'm pinching myself. Anyway, and so, yeah, so Cherry, Gina was told not to tell anyone at my dad's wake. So you have to picture my dad's wake, which was prolific. He was beloved, and he didn't tell anyone, by the way. So we still get letters today from families. And I thought that would be it. But then the whole office came, which was like the United Colors of Benetton. Our office was like ridiculous. Our potlucks were awesome because they were authentically first gen cooking. And people on Wall Street were started to beg for invitations to our potlucks because literally it was like Michelin rated like potlucks, okay? In a very comfortable place, like, you know, like pigs in blanket. I love pigs in blanket,
That's
right?
That's his,
It doesn't take, I'm just happy.
love language.
Doesn't make, but what happened when I had my moment of like, that's it. It was, Cherry came and she organized a convoy of the frontline retail women. They showed up at my dad's wake. And they will all walk in and they look very nervous because they were uncomfortable. They thought they were uncomfortable. They were like, maybe they won't want us here. And then they all came up to my mother one by one. And I could see this happening in slow motion. And, you know, you hear and they're hugging my mom. And I'd always said to my mom that, again, these women are you. And my mom would say, what? What do you mean? I don't understand. And then they said, oh, Mrs. Rhee, like, you did a pretty good job with your son. And I'm listening to this. And, you know, then they came up to me and Cherry, like, grabbed my hand and said, you know, you didn't think we'd find out and be here for you? And I just cried. I just started sobbing. Like, it's like heaving sobbing, like ugly crying. And I couldn't keep it in. And then I was like, why should I keep it in? And my mom's crying, watching this, because now she gets it. She's like, oh, my bowl cut son, this is to make women like me feel comfortable and to reward pro-social behavior. Like, you did everything that you learned in school and Wall Street. You know it so well, you did it backwards. And I said, yeah, that's what I did. I did do that. And so that was the moment for me. When people ask me, like, when did you know you were going to make it or be successful? I answer it differently. I said, that moment, that was success. That moment right there. And that's it. And so since then, I'm in sort of a state. You know, we talked about this, like, so a bunch of, not Benedictine monks, but Buddhist monks started reaching out to me. They would say, you're in a state. I said, I've seen it. That's it. That was success. And I'm not scared of anything anymore about like things that I cared about or insecurities. And I was stripped naked that day again. And so a lot of that, that's what Cherry did for me. And so every time I go to Howard, anything I'm doing, I think of her, I think of her sons. And that's what I'm working for. And, you know, it's transcends race, it transcends everything. It's just, I think parents, families, what they want for their children. I think that children deserve more than they're getting now. And that's what I'm working toward.
So how does the business community help to perpetuate this? What do you need to tap into, and who needs to respond to your call to be able to get this out, the message out as quickly as possible?
Well, some of the things I've been doing, I don't use the word but or ever. Maybe I do. Never say never or always. I try not to. So the life is an and, it's a constant oxymoron. I'm in the business community very much still. You know, I invest. I'm on a affiliate JP Morgan Chase board. They just threw a huge soiree for me 2 days ago. So if you think all capitalists have no heart, it's not true. A lot of them have it. They just want permission to say it. So I think my role is to give them permission because I have the track record in the private sector, right? It's also coming from an unexpected source. Like I'm a dude. I look like this. This face is not a normal face speaking about some of these things. There's a little bit of cognitive, like, whoa. And so people pay attention a little bit. And I also, you know, tease them. I say, you know, our overall financial returns are over 160% per year for 25 years. That's pretty good unlevered, isn't it? So I say that, and then it's sort of wryly. I'm like, is that acceptable return? And they say, how do you do that? I said, well, since when does the term capital just mean financial capital? It's never meant that in the history of like anything. That's not what it means. And since when do you think accounting also means accountability? Those mean two different things. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm in a lot of worlds. And I'm in academia. So I chose those schools carefully. You didn't invite me, so I would have spent time here, but I didn't know you then. I don't want, but you know, so in addition to Howard, I teach at MIT. And I think I'm maybe the second or third person to ever hold joint appointments at these two schools. You wouldn't put these two schools in the same sentence, but in my world, it makes sense to me. Like, why shouldn't MIT and Howard collaborate on systems design? It's a strength of both schools. And that's what I'm doing. The book is, again, I almost went away to hibernation. It may surprise you. I am a like a introvert. I get very tired I like being alone, playing music and reading. But some things happen, like it's with Howard, like I'm being pulled out, right? The TED people said, you need to do this. Brene, you need to do this. And so on the Brene podcast, I confessed to everyone, I was like, I'm not very good at this book writing. There are enough people talking. I don't want to write another book, right? And so that's what I'm doing. I'm merging seemingly orthogonal worlds right now. And in a lot of ways, this is a parable of the United States. What I'm really saying is I'm asking people, like, what's going on? What are we doing? Like, and do you need more proof of the fact that mutualism, when it declines, forget the social compact, look at the cost of insurance. Like, so for you finance geeks, right? look at the cost of insurance. It's really lonely and expensive to live a rogue life. And to really have freedom, you need other people, another oxymoron. And that's what I'm saying. And so the business community, I switched language. They're listening to me, and I'm not doing this. That's why it's a parable. I'm saying, read it and tell me what you think. Like, does it resonate with you? And they are, the business community, I'm nudging them, but it's just one person. So I'm doing, this is a way to scale. And if it gives you any comfort, this is not a humble brag, but this is a statement of fact, because you always have to talk performance too and results. The book debuted as the #1 nonfiction book in the United States 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I'm a first-time author. I hate social media and I don't really use it. So I'm tapping into something that, and it gives me hope. I think a lot of people want and know this is intuitively, like the 5-year-old me, it is right. But maybe they're just asking for permission and to act like that and say it. And so Red Helicopter, as a beyond the book, it's also like I don't even know what to call it, a modern day Disney, Pixar, just a way of thinking, a branded way of thinking. You know, the role that it's trying to serve is similar to like Sam in Lord of the Rings. It's to help ring bearers. So oftentimes I have found in my life that it takes more courage to be the second person versus the first, because the first person often gets hung out to dry. No one says I agree. And so the spirit of the book, and I think the spirit of really great leadership is always actually to be the second, to support someone in truth. And so that's what Red Helicopter is. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so this book tour is less of a book tour. It's more of I've said it's like the Federalist Papers. If you look at where I'm going, mayors are hosting, Stockholm's asking me to come because the Scandinavians have view on happiness that perhaps there's some magic why they're generally the happiest, they score higher. And so I'm convening interesting people in a very important year in a nonpartisan way. I'm just reminding people what Amanda read from Leo Tolstoy. And I'm saying it first, and I'm asking someone to say it second. And in cases where someone says it first, I'm standing at the ready to say it second and saying, I agree with you. You're not alone. So.
Well, that is a beautiful way to end our portion, and we wanted to open it up for a little bit of Q&A if anybody has any pressing questions.
And I also want to play the piece.
Yes, would you like to do that
You
now?
want to hear the original music piece? It's so sometimes like, this is a statement against zeros and ones in AI. I like the number 2. Right? And I treat people like that. I'm like, I'm not going to pigeonhole you in a 0 or 1, and everyone has a chance to reinvent their future. It's just, human beings have they're much more beautiful than being an actuarial table. Like, so this sometimes to convey difficult, intangible things that are oxymoronic, like, unless you physically are in a room and you feel chung, like, I don't know, like, this is the feeling, that's chung, this feeling in this room of like, but for me, it's music. And so the book is a piece of music. It's a serenade in E flat major. When you read it, it's in 3 acts with a bridge, and it's literally in song. So this is a piece that's 2 minutes. It's a fractal of the entire book in 2 minutes. And you're going to hear 2 songs. The first one is Adidang, which represents my parents. Adidang is like God Bless America times 5,000. If you're Korean, it means to be Korean. It transcends language. It is Korean. And then the other song is Amazing Grace. So you're going to hear the 2 songs weave in and out. There are 3 instruments on purpose, 3, 7, 12, 10, figure very prominently in this book for many reasons. And then you're going to hear both my parents die. You're going to hear me struggle and wanting to quit, and my mother singing to me and saying no. Okay, so all that in 2 minutes. So this is, oh, where'd the mic go? Oh. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you so much. That was a very powerful and empowering speech talk. All the changes that you have made, as much as you identify as an introvert, you really have other people in your life, like a wife and child. And how has that been, making all these rather dramatic changes?
Well, the protagonists in this book are all women. It's my mother, it's the women at Ashley Stewart, it's my wife. And it's true. It's like I'm a bit of a bumbling Odysseus, and they would nudge me to be better. That's really what happened. Like every time I wanted to sort of, my wife would say, that's not the person I married. My wife, yeah, I wouldn't have done what I did without Meg, and couldn't have actually done it. And so you want to more oxymorons. My wife is this super white North Carolina woman, and our kids are biracial. Like I've lived that life. It's all counterpoint. Like in musical terms, it's all counterpoint. My children are very proud of this. I wouldn't have published it and you know, my family, my parents used to always say to me, James, there's only the 5 of us in this country. Whenever I would fight with my brother and sister, they're like, it's just the 5 of us. And my parents were very wise. I think they were wrong with that. That's what I write in the book. We had a lot of people help our little family growing. So many people. And my kids, at the end, I write in the acknowledgements, I think you should know once and for all, you have so many people who love you. And that's what this book is about. My kids are very well loved by a lot of people. So yeah, they're proud. And like my wife is the CEO of Cure Alzheimer's. CEO of Cure Alzheimer's. She's one of the, she seeds scientists, like she's a scientist. So believe it or not, like outside of sometimes of the home, I bring more of the quant person, but at home, she's the quant scientist. I'm the emotional, erratic poet. That's the balance. But a lot of times in my professional life, you know, like I'll play the other role, and so I sort of play both. It just depends on the singing counterpoint. Like I'm like, okay, you over-index here, I'll sing this way. So, but yeah, my family, I miss my parents. It's really fundamentally, that's what a lot of, it took me 3 years to even start typing a book, because I couldn't write the book, I didn't think, until I could get over my mother. I'm still not over it, but like just to be objective about it, like it was too much. I just couldn't write it. And then one day after the 3-year anniversary, it just unleashed. Like the music came into my head, and I started putting that down, and then saying it's so clear to me how the book should flow. It became easier.
Well, they're alive in you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You gotcha right there.
Oh, hi. Hi, thank you so much. This has just been fascinating. I'm really interested in your students' reaction to this sort of radical but grounded approach to things.
The students, I find the younger people, I'm curious, there are a lot of younger people here. So I work with a lot of younger people, and I also work with younger people at firms like McKinsey. So I train I have a lot of respect for McKinsey, and also I'm not thrilled that they advised the Sackler family. And by the way, advised the opioid clinics that also profited after there was addiction problems. So then there was clinicians who also made money this way. So I'm not Okay, so, but I train their engagement managers, which is sort of when you become a vice president level, so maybe they're around 30. So if the students say 18 to 30 or 15 to 30, I spend a lot of time with them. Their response to what I'm saying, teaching and writing is one of, is this not how it is? It's intuitively should be this way. Like, you mean the work at work, it's a completely different legal regime and people change personalities?
Hmm.
And they're like, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. A lot of this is just kindness math. And like, you know, I'd say to the kids, I teach them accounting, for instance, and I said, you know, accounting's made up, right? And that's the reaction. They laugh. They're like, but adults laugh and the kids go, yeah, it's just a convention. We made it up. Kindness and math, we didn't make up. Right? Math is a science. And I think one of the things that's happening in our society is that we think accounting is math. It's not. Math is discovered. It's a science. It's physics. Music is math. Accounting is not math. It uses some math. So the younger people are relieved. They're like, so I'm teaching them intuitively what it should be. And then I also teach them, this is how it works in real life. And then it's up to you to have agency to weave a middle path. I can give you an example, like this for some of the businessy folks. Accounting doesn't measure most intangible things because it's too immeasurable, unmeasurable. You can't measure it. And so why my TED Talk, I'm literally making fun of the word goodwill, because in your personal lives, you know what goodwill is, and that's important. But in business, goodwill is an asset that's created only when a company buys another company over its net tangible assets. You literally buy goodwill with money. So the more you overpay for a company, the more goodwill you have. The more cheap debt you use, which risks employee livelihood, the more goodwill you create. And my TED Talk is about looking at the camera and saying, you understand why the behavioral primes are completely different. This is just one example. We're sabotaging, we're taking over words and using them in a weird way in the business setting. Mm-hmm. So the kids, they don't know enough to sort of laugh yet. They're like, what? And I said, yep, that's what it is. And so I have a lot of other examples. I mean, employee retention. I mean, this is one of the things that two companies may look exactly the same from a financial perspective. And I say, which one's better? And they say, how can you tell? Well, I always say it's on the balance sheet. And if Amanda's company say that the retention level of, because people are happy and they're well taken care of and they're learning, say the retention level is much less than this other company, you wouldn't see it on a snapshot of a financial statement, because the future asset she's creating, like there's cost to turnover. It's immeasurable, so the accountants don't let you put it on your balance sheet, which means it never runs through your income statement. And so really what I'm doing is actually, it's truth. I'm adjusting the accounting financials to reflect humanity, but there's with a dollar amount. There's a very easy way to quantify the future cost of training and hiring new people. But because it's not perfect, we don't put it on our books. But I'm saying there are plenty of things that are not perfect that you can take a pretty good swag at and put on your books. That's what I'm teaching. So it's not hocus pocus, it's actually truthful investing. And it's resulted in those returns I just said, because generally speaking, when you seek truth, you make better decisions. It's our biases that we make false decisions, right? That help? So the kids are happy. The ones that are happiest are my MIT MBA students who come back, they're mid-30s to older, 35 to 40. You know, sometimes you need a reset at mid-30s. They really appreciate the class because by then they've realized that, oh, life is really hard. There's a lot of pain and sorrow. And all the things we learned in business school that we thought were fluff are the most important things. And we didn't pay enough attention in those classes. We just thought it was all about like accounting and finance theory and CAPM theory. And then they come back for exec MBA, and they're much wiser. They're like, we have lived through this now. And so for the younger people, you're all going to live through life. You have to experience it. No video game. I'm not trying to create another simulation to simulate life. You have to live through it and have loss, gain, death, right? Bad decisions. You have to. That's what agency is. It's not perfection. You make bad decisions. That's what happens. But I'm just hoping that the book maybe accelerates their learning cycle, maybe 10%, or gives you comfort that when you mess up entirely, you're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do that. And what was that thing about accounting again? Like, does that make sense? It's not meant to substitute like realness, which is one of the things I worry we're all doing through this and AI. So.
We have one more question.
I'll admit to being one of the more businessy people in the room, but could you just talk a little bit about the red helicopter as a metaphor for agility and expand a little bit on that?
Sure.
Talk about the quant side of how you might quantify agility or apply math or not math to
Yeah.
it.
Sure. So mental models are very important, right? So we say this is what you should be, and we all aspire to be that. And so I think putting aside the Goodwill Chung side of the red helicopter, and so a helicopter, I also am teaching all of my students and also CEOs, by the way, a different mental model and saying perhaps the version of success that you've been programmed to aspire to both in life and business is not an airplane. I think many people would say you want to be a jet plane and you want to fly really high, fast, the highest, the fastest. And leadership is being captain of a 767, the flight 787. You know, the jumbo, that you want to carry 500 people in the back. And you want to be the pilot. And I guess I'm saying that maybe after 53 years of whatever I've been through, maybe a better goal is to be a helicopter pilot. That you can move in 6 different directions. Planes cannot. You can land anywhere. Planes cannot. You have the power of vertical lift. Planes do not. And one thing that the helicopters can do that planes cannot do in particular is they can hover. And hovering is the last maneuver helicopter pilots learn. It's the most difficult maneuver. And you can't teach it. You have to do it. And so the analogy that people use, my pilot friends, they said, James, my wife is sort of kiboshing my helicopter pilot license. She's like, not yet. Wait till the kids are older. I'm like, what's that mean? Anyway, so they say that when you hover, a helicopter pilot, it's like balancing a glass marble or a marble on a sheet of glass. That's how they teach pilots to hover. It's that motion. It's 3 adjustments. So with helicopter, it teaches you don't make dramatic adjustments. It's very small adjustments constantly. And the crashes are caused by big adjustments. And so just think metaphorically about your life or the CEO of a company, right? Just it's constant motion. And even though it may not look like you're moving, hovering is constant motion. So by the way, as an aside, because we're also, a lot of the language, if you blanked out the name and instead of saying, if you said, I'm reading a manual and you didn't know it was about a helicopter, the way the best helicopter pilots are described are many of the adjectives used to describe monks. It's calm. Intuition, it's feel, it's a calm. And so that's one answer to your questions. And particularly for you younger people, how many careers are you going to have? Many more than we did, any of us did. You're going to have to. So agility, it is a very important asset, like in every way, financial, mental, emotional agility, to have perseverance, to be resilient. You have to be able to do that and hover and know when to land. And I've landed a bunch of times in my life when I'm like, I gotta think about things. So that's number one. Second thing, here's an example of agility where you're primed to think that it's not. I give this example in the book. When I was doing designing the operating system of Ashley Stewart, everyone was saying, oh, we have to import more goods from abroad. And I said, no, I'm going to import less goods from abroad, and I want to pay more for the product. Right. So think about this. This guy's crazy. He wants kindness. Like, what is going on here? I was like, no, I want to pay more. So, and it isn't just from, I was very proud to create more jobs domestically. That was a good thing. I was happy about that. That has long-term benefits for, these are positive externalities, right? But the other reason I said, well, that's because your understanding of accounting is only two-dimensional. How do you measure the cost of time in a financial statement? By paying less per garment, you're giving up 6 weeks of time for it to be on the water to come. I would rather pay more per garment and take back 6 weeks. Does that make sense? And we turned our inventory. It went from like 3 to 8 times a year, which is very good. And so we were closer to fashion trends. We were very fast. So think about the helicopter analogy. We were adjusting constantly. So I said, see, like, I'm paying more, but we're making more money. That's a very good example of how accounting primes you to make sometimes not the right decision.
I'm gonna look to Gary to see if we have time for another question. It's about 5:20, just so you're aware.
Time for 1 or 2 more questions, probably. I want anyone to leave not have.
How about the young people? Come on.
Are you saying I'm not young?
Oh, nurses too? Sorry, no, students. So there's like, you're not a student, are you?
Oh, no.
Okay. How about some students? Like, would love to.
One question over here.
Okay, I'm a student of learning.
Oh, hi.
And you talk about kindness and soul and all that. Where does joy come into your?
Oh, thanks for, that's like a perfect question. So the book is structured with life is act 1, money is act 2, and joy is act 3. So the book's actually structured that way. And it's like, we're on the same, this is Chung right here, okay? So, and then the other way to visualize this, there's, hopefully you can picture that the next stage of this, I'm going to do like animated education product where you are a helicopter, so you can see yourself. So the helicopter body, like the little round where you sit, that's life. And then money is the rear prop, and I'll explain. And then joy is the top prop. And so in Newton's third law, so the torque that allows the helicopter to have vertical lift, you have to offset that force. That's why you have the rear prop that spins the opposite way. It's just physics, right? Otherwise, a helicopter would do this. And so I think that sometimes, and I've been guilty of this too, and like, I'm not dismissing the importance of decent work, wages, and money. I'm not I live in that world. But when money is your top prop and joy is the offset, I think maybe a better way of thinking about it is to sort of get your red helicopter story, like your life, the life you want, the value systems you want. You want joy, you want to live a joyful life. You need to make enough money to effectuate this without, you need to live, you need to eat and retire. And so that's where joy is. So joy is the top prop. And so that's visually what the helicopter looks like. And then, joy for me, and I'm not the only one. It's not like this is an original thing. It's distinct. There's a reason why it's not called happy. I could have said life, money, happy. So I wrote life, money, joy. And, joy is more intrinsic. I think happy tends to be with much more ephemeral and externally triggered. And joy comes from within. And joy also comes from sadness. And so I've done a better job in my life being like less mad. I don't get mad a lot anymore. Instead, when I feel that emotion, I just try to move it into sadness pretty quickly. And I find that going from sad to joy is a much easier continuum, and it creates more potential for joy than being mad or angry. And I just find there's a lot of anger right now everywhere. And I'm like, I don't think that leads to good things. There's not a good balance for that. So I'd rather people admit right now in this country or anywhere that it's sad. And then maybe once we get people to sad, that there's a solution. Hopefully that answers your question? Can you picture the helicopter? And so one day I want to have data viz helicopters where everyone can like design their own helicopter. And it's a visual stimulus for particularly anyone, but particularly youth, like that when you're not living your life in balance, it'll show you. And your helicopter will look like this. And maybe you'll get a prompt and say, land. Right? Call your mom. Like, or why are you not saving any of why aren't you putting any money into your 529 account? Why do you think you're better than the market and you're churning your account? Like index funds, like Buffett's pretty Munger, like listen to them. They're really good at it. You're not smarter than the market. So it's these just wise lessons. So why don't we make it easier for people to be wise? Instead, I think a lot of the tech that's out there is the exact opposite priming, right? They want your money. They want you to do not great things. So I'm like, why can't we have a brand or a system that primes people to do wiser things? Like, why not? And wouldn't that create long-term value? And that's the sort of, not bet I'm making, I'm just living a life. But I think 10 years from now, if the only asset on the books of Red Helicopter is agility and trust and goodwill, I think that's going to be worth a lot of economic value. I think I'll be comfortable talking to young people and saying, would you rather trust Red Helicopter with your 529 account or Goldman Sachs? Who do you trust? And I think that in 10 years, trust will be at even more of a premium in our society. And that's the investment I'm making. And I think that'll create a lot of positive externalities along the way. And what a quote, rich life to live. Like that would, but it may not, but that's okay too. No,
We have a
discount,
student
Goldman
question. We
Sachs.
can't leave until you have a student question. Here it is.
Well, I know my friends to the right and in front of me were all freshmen. So what advice have you learned throughout your life that you would want to tell your freshman year self, if you could?
I had a harder time adjusting to college. I think I had too much fun. I did. And I tried to row crew until I realized, why am I waking up at 4 a.m? And anyway, I wasn't disciplined enough to row crew. I think that it's what I would tell my kids. I have a 20, 18, 16-year-old kids. School doesn't stop when you graduate here. It just keeps going. I think I was under a mistake in that, you know, you keep learning. This is like a gift to be able to just be in your work is to learn right now. Like, what a gift that is, that you have that chance. Your job is to learn. That's awesome, you know? I think the other thing is that I write this in accounting terms to keep a very agile and lean balance sheet, to not focus on your income statement, is to work on your balance sheet. Income statement sort of like how much you make, what you spend on rent, and your balance sheet is the result of your decisions. So net worth, but also net wealth, it's all the intangibles. So I've done a better job. Focusing on the relationships that make me a better person. I think when I was younger, I didn't understand what, as well as I do now. I was 18, right? But like, there's a difference between friends and friend. It's that capital F, friend. Yeah, it's that. So don't mistake how many likes you have and followers and friends. Like, that's not friends. That's the advice I give and those things don't show up on a balance sheet if you use financial GAAP. They don't. You have to do your own accounting. That's my advice. Is that impractical? Can you? Yeah, like it ultimately ends up being the quality of your relationships. And there's a bunch of neuro studies that prove it. But we should listen to it. Like this is like, for me, like I'm just sitting here. It's like this is amazing. Like we're gonna have a lot of, it's fun.
We have more friends now.
We have a lot of fun. Like, so you know, it's ridiculous because when you do, it's funny. Like it's very fun, and we laugh. Like half the conversation is absurdity. It's very fun, and we're like, let's do that. It'll never work. Exactly. Let's do it. And even pulling off this, which I know is not easy, right? Thank you. But this was like, let's do it. It's right. Like the timing's right. This venue is right. Like it's right. And so we just said, let's just stop doubting ourselves. Let's just do it. And so it happened, you know? And we just met at your gala, right? The city here. And she was like, you and Meg want to drive up an hour plus to come to sure. Like, we're going. And so that's what we're doing. I feel very lucky. Like, it's really nice. So thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful. Appreciate it.
I told you they were soulful. Didn't I tell you that? So just a few things before you get out of your seats. One, there's food out there, so continue this conversation. There were people who couldn't make it tonight that you wish were here. We recorded it, and we'll be pushing that out, so pay attention to that. And the last thing is on that table as you go out, sign up for the raffle. We're raffling off a little toy red helicopter.
Aw.
No, we're not. We're raffling off
You have
copies of
to.
James' book is what we're raffling off. The book, The Red Helicopter. And so make sure you enter that raffle on your way out so that you can maybe win a book, and James will increase its value by signing it for you probably. I'm sure he will. So Amanda and James, thank you so very much for this event.